Claire Kilner and David Hancock cooked, dude. House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 4 Tumbleton is insane. I'm not going to get into any spoilers here for people who are show only. Even if you got roped into this without knowing anything about Game of Thrones or the other spin-off. But Ormund is a fantastic device for looking at the themes of this world, and if the narrative is a river, he seems to be the regressive delta of symbolism. I didn't even know what a regressive delta was before I wrote this, but I just thought that I'd throw that in for any riverheads out there. One of the things that was immensely clear in episode 4 to me was the conversation of power's relationship to vulnerability. Back to back, we had Rhaenyra chastising Ulf the White for wantonly risking his neck for a brewski, and Aegon ignoring my boy Larys and getting schooled on what happens when you throw threats around when your power is dwindling and invisible. The dramatic irony in that is so perfect. Ever since Aegon was born, Rhaenyra's legitimacy was on the back foot and her power dwindled. Good shit, good shit. We love a Shakespearean upset in this house. But let's get to the core of the video. The episode opens and closes with the absolute monster that is Ormund fucking Hightower. Dude really pulled out his tower of schlong and slapped any doubters with it. The guy's been stewing away for 3 episodes now, and then within his first scene of the episode he calls Rhaenyra out as a bitch with a dragon, before waxing poetic about the rightful line of the throne, and pledging his men will be on their best behaviour. Then, when amongst his own men, he passes wisdom of how to deal with someone underneath his station to Daeron, only to disparage Boros Baratheon's illiteracy, despite Boros being by all measures a higher stature than his own. We've already seen that Ormund cares not for being a man of his word, but behind closed doors, he comfortably flaunts his hypocrisy. From here on out, we see 3 major themes in the episode, all of which relate to Ormund: vulnerability, equity, and cruelty. Throughout the episode, we see the main characters grapple with their relationship to being vulnerable in a manner that would make a jelly wrestling enthusiast need the coldest of showers. The first instance of this is Rhaenyra being anxious about sticking her neck out about the crown's financial situation, but she is coached by Mysaria to appoint an intermediary for the people to blame, distancing herself from the sword of Damocles. Rhaenyra inverts this as a tactic when consulting Alicent right after the advice is dispensed. I don't know if it's supposed to be conscious or not, but the assurance of not wanting to kill Daeron after the fact is almost like saying, "You and Helena are safe, Alicent, because I wasn't going to kill your son anyway." These dynamics are in stark contrast with Aegon, of course. With no dragon and nobody recognizing him, he's so used to having invulnerability that he doesn't recognize how compromised he could be. Even after temporarily being taken hostage by the brigands of episode 1. Despite being deposed, he is magnetically pulled towards Sunfire. Larys prying him off by telling him to live is a really potent scene, as it speaks to the dream of power and invulnerability compromising one's ability to act. It's worth noting that despite Ormund scoffing at illiteracy, Larys' ability to read and the paltry amount of coin he had left on him only barely raises him above Aegon. Before Aegon's final scene, it's important that the show emphasizes Hugh and Ulf, because even though they both have dragons, they are similarly not aware of how open they are to being caught in a compromised position, morally and physically, respectively. This, juxtaposed with Aegon's fumbling around in Rook's Rest, circles the dramatic irony of these pieces on the board moving around. It's quite funny how Ulf claims his belly is his, and Rhaenyra explains just how easy he would be able to be gutted. And then immediately after that scene, Janos gets his shoe made out with, like I do with my Margaret Qualley body pillow, which is getting off lightly considering what Rhaenyra articulated. Another Mysaria gem was her and all while teeing up the concept of infantry being more merciful than sending dragons. It is a rare opportunity for mundane people to test their mettle against each other without dragon intervention. Evidently, sometimes soldiers get tired of being in the cuck's chair watching a Targaryen roast their enemies with their swords in their hands. And this explains Kristen Cole advocating for guerrilla tactics against the Riverland host, relishing in the chance to fight free from dragons, despite the Riverlanders' manpower dwarfing theirs. This seeking of equitable, merit-based justice is contrasted by Daemon. After all, he kills a goat herder minutes after hearing his daughter had fed sheep stealer to tame him. It's no surprise Daemon is a machine of injustice. A dragon that would consume a sheep or a peasant without thinking twice. It doesn't matter about her inconveniences, much like my father considering if he was going to come back after he left to buy a bottle of milk. The dichotomy of this was encapsulated by a post-season 2 ayahuasca Daemon, still having ambition for a multi-continent empire, despite being open to humbling himself. The rules are just different to him and his ilk. The final Mysaria gem was this dance break. She really is the true girl boss of the show. Okay, I'm done glazing Sonoya Mizuno. The concept of cruelty is almost the mortar between the bricks of the other two themes. The world is not equitable because of the cruel. People, great and small, fear being vulnerable, and once they become it, they are often kept vulnerable by the cruel. Much like the time my local dominatrix kept it ambiguous on if my calls were being ignored for any good reason. While the scene in Tumbledown does not present Ormund as a nice guy, that was just the tip of the iceberg, and it is through that lens we interpret Alicent's comment that Gwaine considered him cruel, but was predisposed to seeing others as such, implying Gwaine's sensitive nature is the problem. Certainly, Gwaine demanding Criston Cole reprimand the soldiers assaulting common folk proves he has a compassionate mind. However, it is interesting that Criston is less palatable than his cousin to Gwaine, especially given what we see later. It's only by Criston evoking clinging to honour, as Gwaine insisted upon earlier, that the implicit need to rise above the base, cruel instincts that Criston keeps Gwaine in line. That reminder echoes loudly given the assault attempt takes place in Dumbleton following the conversation, despite Gwaine's appraisal of Ormund being a better commander to follow. I suppose, to his credit, he sees the value in a public theatre of justice. When in private, Ormund impatiently tries carving out enough space for someone to be under the thick desk to provide stress relief while preserving some modesty. It's fascinating how Daeron responds, given Daemon had been telling Rhaena that a wild dragon is too dangerous. In Echo Pass, we see Ormund acting wild, and a dragon cowed into submission thanks to the history of seeing the abusive cruelty this man is capable of. Daeron possibly saved the life of the page boy before Ormund's tantrum that would have painted Ormund equal to Daemon's explosive reaction to getting a message in Season 1. Daeron is so well trained, he asks solely about Gwaine, and has no on-camera follow-up questions about Aemond. Finally, the cruelty of the gold cloaks on the populace demonstrate how corruptive power can transform someone to be cruel, proving that this story is not about Rhaena being a moral paragon, and that just because she was an underdog, it does not mean that she can do no wrong. It's hardly hanging all the rat catches, but it's not that distant from it. All of this coalesces perfectly for the backdrop of the final scene. Ormund scolding Daeron for being affectionate to Viserion evokes the conversation about taming dragons. It appears to be the rejection of the notion of a dragon being tamed. However, when you consider the symbolism of Ormund taming Daeron, the biggest threat Daeron poses to Ormund is if Daeron remembers, oh wait, I don't have to listen to my mother's cousin and be afraid of him. Ormund is using Daeron as the buffer between himself and being vulnerable to danger, much like Rhaenyra uses Torrhen Manderley and Daemon uses the goat herder's skull. When Ormund extols the faith and divine purpose or patriarchal virtue, it's the other side of the coin of Rhaenyra talking about her divine right and her paranoia about the High Septon conspiring against her. Injustice and an inequitable situation frustrates Criston and Ormund because they have no dragons, and Rhaenyra is bothered by the systemic status quo of male succession bias and the Andal's religion. Ormund's talking points of justice trumpets in the man who fought off an assault attempt, strengthening how little Ormund cares to be seen as a hypocrite. And I really enjoyed the various noises Viserion makes in response to how uncomfortable Daeron gets. Daeron pointlessly pleads the case for mercy, and that's admirable, but his retraction of emulating Viserys speaks volumes to how Ormund's cruelty wins out over why Daeron was sent as a ward, which is tragic. It's a bit amusing that the power Ormund exerts over Daeron leads to him and Roxton bowing their heads in deference. The illusion of Daeron's higher authority is restored by the affirmation of men who weaponize Daeron so that they can no longer be vulnerable. I really like how Viserion disrupts the candles on the altar as he approaches to provide a curtain call. I find it visually striking on the incompatibility of the two, and how it is done in fulfilling Ormund's desires despite his speeches. It's no wonder that Daeron turns his head away from the fire, and Ormund looks into it unflinching and unbothered by the smell of cooking flesh. When we examine dragons as a symbol of disproportionate power, the thesis of the world comes clear when you consider men like Ormund. As his uncle said,
The gods have yet to make a man who lacks the patience for absolute power. The world of Westeros is full of men like Ormund, and there'll always be another one, as is the case in reality. But it's only understanding the tools and not being blind to them that people with better intentions can get around the danger in the first place. But yeah, that's more or less what I picked up in episode 4. I really liked it. Let me know if you saw any other symbols that sort of resonate with these kind of points. Hopefully episode 5 keeps the momentum up in terms of the high quality. If it doesn't, maybe I'll do an analysis of Pluribus or something, I don't know. Still figuring out what I'm doing. But be sure to like and subscribe.